Well, let's bring in David Weinstein, who's a former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. As a legal brain, what's your assessment? Do any of these suits being launched by the Trump campaign have any merit?
They have all a long shot to get anywhere here. Remember, the issues that are presented and what's going to get this up to the Supreme Court are going to be the issue of the recount. As far as the recounts go, it's not even close in any of these states, certainly not within a margin of error. His demands in Michigan that they be allowed to view, as well as in Pennsylvania, that they be allowed to view the recounts, they're not even recounts at this point. They're just counting the ballots. So the legs that they have to stand on are very shaky at this point.
Do they have a right to a recount in any of the states?
Well, certainly in those states where the margin of victory is in some states less than 1%, others less than 0.5%, they have a right to a recount. But the margins that we're seeing across the board, even if he succeeds in a recount or even in these recounts, he's not going to get the swing that he needs to accumulate enough votes to get the states he needs to push him over the top. So it's going to prove fruitful in the end. And quite frankly, given the fact of how close things are, not even get itself up to the Supreme Court, as we saw back in Gore versus Bush.
So, I mean, what's the point then of Rudy Giuliani and others, other Republicans launching these challenges?
It comes down to something that we've seen before, certainly from this administration. It's not so much about the legal merit of the issues, but a PR campaign. The rhetoric that this president has been promoting throughout is that there was fraud in this election, that the election was stolen from him. By continuing to present this viewpoint and by making these legal challenges, it's providing a rationale for his base to take his message forward after he loses this election and promote a rhetoric that says that this was not a just result. But quite frankly, that's not what's happening here. There was an overwhelming number of votes in the popular election, and then that converts to the Electoral College votes that are going to be needed and necessary for former Vice President Biden to win this election.
Is there also a risk that Donald Trump could actually alienate, some conservative and Republican supporters by this type of behavior?
Well, there's certainly that risk that exists. It hasn't happened before, and it hasn't happened to this point. People who are dyed-in-the-wool supporters of him are going to buy into the rhetoric that he's putting forward. But there may be some people who simply feel that enough is enough, and that this election was conducted fairly, that every person's vote counts, and those votes that were in place at the time that they were due to be put in place should be counted. So to some degree, yes, it may alienate some of the conservative factor that's behind him, but in reality, those who believe in him are going to continue to believe in him despite what the truth brings forward.
Okay, well, let's just make the assumption, and it's only an assumption for the sake of argument, that Joe Biden does end up next president, the 46th president of the United States. Where does Donald Trump, a controversial figure, stand legally then? We know that there was an attempt to impeach him, but do you think he is like to face prosecutions?
Well, there are a number of prosecutors who are still investigating allegations against him. Those include state prosecutors. Those include federal prosecutors. Those investigations will move forward. And once he leaves office, he will no longer have that cloak of protection of being the chief executive officer. And those prosecutions can proceed forward. So he's going to find himself in a situation where he is finally going to have to answer some of the questions that have been posed. And he may very well find himself in a legal battle where we're not just talking about money anymore, but we're talking about life and liberty as a result of allegations of criminal violations.
He can, though, can he not give himself, as well as his family, but give himself some kind of presidential pardon?
Well, that's an interesting question, and one that's certainly been examined and been looked at. You can't pardon yourself. And the prime example of that is President Nixon. He was pardoned by President Ford. You can't preemptively pardon yourself for what's going on. You can perhaps do that, not even perhaps, you can do that for other people. But the way that the clause is written into our Constitution, you can't pardon yourself.
And what I read, I don't know whether you'll confirm this, is that the Southern District of Manhattan, a well-known, ferocious prosecutor's office, that probably is going to be the biggest cause of legal trouble for Mr. Trump.
No, you're absolutely right. The Southern District of New York, where he tried to replace the chief prosecutor there with someone of his own liking, and that didn't succeed. Those are the people who have been looking perhaps the hardest and have him under the brightest light at the moment, and that's going to be where things pivot back around to once he leaves office.
Do we know what the sort of charges there might be?
Well, you know, there have been allegations with regard to both tax law violations, campaign finance violations, and other wire fraud matters. But, you know, until we see something that comes out, it's all speculation at this point. The grand jury proceedings that have been taking place are certainly shrouded by the secrecy that's allowed them to proceed forward. So we can speculate all we want, but until we see something that actually comes out from that grand jury, we'll have no firm answer.
Well, so far, he's still the president, so we shall see. Thank you very much indeed, David Weinstein, for joining us.
You're welcome, Adam. My pleasure to join you.